Hello, hello, hello. I hope all of you are well. Thanks for coming back and joining me in this episode of the Top Dead Center. Today, we're going to focus on stripping down the 1968 Benelli 350, or as I'm calling it now, the Frankenstein Benelli, down to its bare bones. Every single nut, bolt, grommet, washer is going to come off. Every single linkage is going to come off, and we are going to get it down to the bare metal frame so that we could get it ready for painting. So without any further delay, let's get into it. So this is going to take a couple of days, and I'm going to try to break this down into multiple chapters and show you exactly in detail what all was getting done and what kind of progress was being made for each of these days. So I wanted to get all the peripheral stuff out of the way first, and started by disconnecting the fuel lines and the auxiliary fuel tank, and then with that out of the way, I began taking the carburation system apart. Somehow, the air filter assembly got wedged in between the frame, but after a bit of wiggling around, it got undone. Found this carburetor on eBay, as this motorcycle did not have one when I got it. I do believe it to be the same model and make, but perhaps they used velocity stacks instead of air filters. With the carby out of the way, I got to the exhaust system next. This, again, is not the original exhaust pipe for this motorcycle. I had just put on one I had in stock to test whether the engine would start. Next, I began undoing the electrical systems. For those of you who are new here, if this looks like somebody hacked all of this in, you are right. This Benelli was probably somebody's parts bike at some point and was missing the generator and the complete ignition unit. So, instead of trying to get the originals, I took a different route and upgraded to a modern 12-volt system from Vape. I had installed this temporarily to check if I could get the bike started. If you folks would like to discuss the pros and cons of the 12-volt system, please feel free to use the comments section below. Before getting deeper into the disassembly, I thought it best to drain the engine oil, as it could get really messy otherwise. This oil is new. I had just used it to test the bike starter, but it already is dirty from all the decades of grime inside. After draining the oil, I removed the front pegs, the starter lever, the gear shifter, which is on the right hand side, and the main spring for the center stand. The front foot pegs are also attached to one of the studs that hold the engine. The best way to dismantle is to get the heaviest bits out of the way first. That would be the engine. After undoing the foot peg and the starter lever, I started working on the engine bolts. There are just 4 stud bolts holding this engine, 3 long ones and a short one. Luckily, they came off quite easily. Before removing the rest of them studs, I took a scissor jack to hold the engine in place. It will release the pressure on the bolts and also prevent the engine from dropping off suddenly. The remaining 2 studs were a bit stuck, but nothing that some WD-40 and light tapping could not overcome. And with that, it was time to remove the freed engine. I carefully wiggled it so that it was free off the frame and lifted it out of the stand and placed it on a dolly. With the heaviest part out of the way, I quickly took off the rest, starting with the toolbox and the headlamp assembly, which had the rest of the wiring, electricals, and switches. Now that I had a rolling chassis and all the electrical and mechanical parts damageable by water separated, I decided to give it a good wash. A good wash helps me see things more clearly and keeps my workspace clean. It was also getting late, and I decided to wrap it up for the day. I started by organizing the parts I had taken off on the previous day, carefully bagging and tagging them with some WD-40 to prevent any further rusting. Now that everything was bagged and tagged, it was time to dismantle the rest of the motorcycle. I started out with the back wheel, which came out fairly easy. With this making the motorcycle unstable, I added the scissor jack back and leveraged the center stand to hoist the front wheel up. The front axle needed light tapping to release, but nothing too difficult. I was surprised that so far not a single bolt had seized on me, or worse, broken off. This definitely was beginner's luck. Moving on to the triple tree, there were two giant nuts holding it from the top. I took the longest breaker bar I could and tried getting them off. They would not budge. I tried different angles to get leverage and was wondering if I had taken the wheels off too soon. The chock in the bike stand would have helped hold the handlebar in place. Perhaps this is where beginner's luck wears off. After going at it for a while, I gave it up and called it a wrap for the day. This problem will need revisiting later. A fresh day and a fresh start. I continued trying to get those nuts off, first with a combination wrench and then with an impact driver, but had no luck. That's when I decided to shift to heat. After heating the nuts for a while, I tried again, and this time it was a success. I undid the handlebar next and started on getting the triple tree out. I tried with the rubber mallet first, but didn't get too far. This also needed assistance from heat. I wasn't worrying about the paint because I will repaint the frame. Eventually, the part came off, but not the way I wanted it to. Luckily, it wasn't damaged. The rest of the front end came off easily. I dismantled and cleaned the forks before storing them away. At this point, only the rear shocks and the swing arm needed to come off. All of that happened without any incident. If you have noticed, many places in this Benelli system seem to use double nuts. I haven't seen them in Hondas of the same era. If you have seen this kind of setup in other places, let me know in the comments below. And that's it. Just like that, it was all done. So it took me like roughly 3 days, mostly because I got stuck. And I did, in day one, I gave the bike a really thorough wash, and that took a lot of hours. And then on day two, I got stuck with those bolts. So I would say this could have been done in maybe 2 days, but it just took me a couple of days more. I'm super excited how this project is progressing so far. But thanks for joining me on this one. And I hope you enjoyed it. Hope to see you in the next one as well.